Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where we try to discuss all sorts of things that happen in our lives, or all sorts of things that are important to be aware of in our lives. Today I want to talk about something, and well, some two things actually, and to be honest, the idea was inspired by a video that Teal Swan made more than 2 years ago. If you don't know who Teal Swan is, she's let's call her a spiritual and self-development teacher, or at least that's how I would call her. And her video, although has some good points and is overall valuable, kind of misses a few points, a few important points about the subject that she's talking about. There's a link in the description of this video. I highly recommend, if you haven't watched it already, to stop my video, click on that link, watch her entire video, and then come back. I will not be talking strictly about her, because that's not something that I do, or at least my intention is not to speak about people themselves so much as the ideas that some people seem to be throwing out in the world. This woman claims to have all sorts of abilities, and she claims to see things super clearly, or maybe not, maybe these are not her claims per se, but the people around her create an image of her that is like this kind of person that can see all sorts of things very clearly and in depth and from multiple perspectives. I have to admit that I enjoyed quite a lot of her videos, and she's got lots of them. If only we are talking about her free content on YouTube, she's got lots of videos, and on top of that she's got some videos that are not, or just general content that is not open, it's paid content. But anyway, what I would like to mention is that I have, let's say, resonated with quite a few of her videos in the past, and still in the present. I definitely recommend that you watch her and her work, because she does, she quite literally puts in a lot of effort to shed light on all sorts of topics and problems and things that many people are just not willing to go into. But I find it quite weird that such a person that has such a high image and claims that, she understands things on so many levels, sometimes fails to see some very important perspectives on a particular subject that she's talking about. Perspectives that are clear to me and to other people as well, and we're nowhere near her level, Anyway, like I said, I don't want to talk about her or anyone else in particular. It's not about humans, it's not about people, it's about the ideas. That video is called "The Success Factor: Never Half-Ass Anything." Like I said, you have the link to that video in the description. If you haven't seen it already, go watch it, because in what follows, I will be talking about what she's been talking, and I will continue with two perspectives that are very, very important, and two big things that basically she's missing. And I will after that I will continue to elaborate on these ideas. First of all, we need to understand, and this is not about her, okay? Yeah, this is a general thing. We need to understand that, and we need to agree that each and every person has her own limitations, okay? And this is absolutely normal. This is not bad or good. Of course, ideally, we would like to be free of limitations, but we cannot be. If we go deep into philosophy, we could say that it's impossible for us not to have limitations, since we are ourselves limited creatures. Okay, we are not truly God. We are just a small piece of God, which by our very nature means that we have limitations. But even if we don't go so high, so as to speak philosophically, but we just keep our feet on the ground, we have to understand that many limitations come indeed from the context in which we live, and the context in which we have been born, we have been raised, etc., etc. Depends on each person, basically where she was born, in what country, what nation, what's the culture over there, how has that person's life been, was it easy, was it hard, in what ways, etc., etc. Okay, so all sorts of aspects contribute to our limitations. As a person that lives neither in the West nor in the East, I can by now see very clearly some aspects, and I'm not calling them limitations, because some of them are not limitations per se, but some aspects that are very typical to American people. And this Teal Swan woman is American. She was born in America, grew up in America, still lives in America. Basically, she's impregnated with the American lifestyle and way of being. Again, this is not bad in itself, but it's an important aspect, because and not just that, but on top of that, from what I know, from her public content, we know that this woman has never actually worked for what in my culture we would call a patron, which is basically a person that has started a company and that owns that company and that can hire you as an employee. Okay, this person has never actually worked for someone, and my best guess is that she has very limited experience with how it is to work for someone. What can you do, what can't you do, what are your freedoms, what are your limitations, how working for someone forces you into certain lifestyles and basically shuts the door closed to other lifestyles, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so there are a whole bunch of factors that make a person have certain limitations that contribute to her impossibility to understand certain aspects of a particular problem. Okay, I'm mentioning this because this is important, not just as aspects of her, but these things apply to everyone. Okay, so again, I highly encourage you to watch her video. I'm not gonna go over it. I'm just gonna make a very, 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 very short resume. What she talks about in that video is the fact that you should always, absolutely always, no matter what, do your very best. Put in all the necessary effort, not just all the necessary efforts, but all your possible efforts and resources in order for you to achieve something. And first of all, we need to go back a little bit to the title, okay? The title of her video is The Success Factor: Never Half-Ass Anything. Honestly, I find it both hilarious and a bit disgusting. I do understand that the term half-ass is or seems to be a normal expression in English. Maybe it's purely American, maybe it's not, and it's common to all English-speaking nations. Maybe some other nations have it or have something like this as well. We don't. And it's very disrespectful. I find it very disrespectful to use that expression, even if you have it, because it clearly shows how much disgust you have towards someone that does not perform at his very best. Okay, it's a very abstract expression, at least to me, you know, half-ass. First of all, when we are working, when we are doing something, unless we're doing literally shit, we are not working with our asses. Like, even the fact that someone came up with that expression is just beyond weird to me. But you know, when we are working with our brain, we are working with our hands, we are working perhaps with our full body. I don't know, maybe some of us with our legs. I don't know anyone that works with his ass. And that is, at least if you don't include, you know, prostitutes or how do you call them? Strip club dancers, you know. Pretty much nobody works with his ass. So why would we talk about half-ass versus what, a full ass? I mean, look, I'm not an idiot. I understand that this is an expression, but you know, expressions typically come from something logical, more or less. And anyway, I'm gonna leave it at this. But the thing that I would like to stress is that it is very disrespectful to tell someone that he has half-assed something, or not to tell him, but to think in these terms, because from the very beginning it means that you do not respect any effort that that person has done, any effort at all. Okay, which of course leaves a few questions, like why did you hire that person in the first place, or why did you ask that person in the first place to do that particular thing, you know, like or why didn't you check him regularly before he finished the work, or anyway, I'm not gonna go into the details. So to close a long parenthesis, in her video she speaks about the idea that you should never half-ass anything, like she says, meaning you should never you should never do a job that's just good enough. And these are actually her words in the video if you watch it. You should always, no matter what, do your very best. Put in all the effort, all the energy, all the time, all your resources. And boy, do I find that to be incredibly stupid. incredibly stupid. Okay, and this comes from a guy that has done many things in his life. This comes from a guy that has had years in which he worked really, really hard. I've had years in which I woke up, I had breakfast, and then I started working directly. And then I stopped only to have lunch, and then I came back and I started working again. And then I stopped to perhaps take a bath, have dinner, and then I continued working. And then I went to bed at, I don't know, 2 in the night or something, and then the next day at 10 a.m. or something like that, I restarted doing the same thing over and over again. And I did this for an entire year in one particular moment in time. I did something equivalent to that later for 2 years in another company. And even in my personal projects, I work as hard as possible, and I'm doing quite a lot. I'm definitely not a half-asser, if you would like to call it this way. I'm definitely not the kind of guy that has this as a lifestyle, but it is critically important for us all to develop a sense of knowing when good enough is good enough. Okay, so let's get back a little bit and start things from the beginning to understand a little bit better this phenomenon. So there are at least 2 potential problems with what she is speaking and what she is suggesting. The idea of always doing your very best and basically consuming yourself by giving everything in the projects that you're doing, in the work that you're doing, regardless of anything. Okay, there are at least 2 potential problems, and she never speaks in her video about those potential problems at all. The first problem is the degree of ease with which you can be manipulated. And the second problem is the real possibility of just wasting your energy, your time, and your resources in general. Okay? There are other aspects as well. I will talk about them a little bit later. So now let's take them one by one. The first problem, the degree of ease with which you can be manipulated. What do I mean by that? If you're that kind of person that has this mindset of absolutely always doing your very best, and for you there's no such thing as the concept of good enough, you can be very, very easily manipulated. Or, well, okay, maybe not very easily, but you can be manipulated in many, in more ways than the usual person. And your chance of being manipulated is much higher than the normal person. When I say normal person, put it in quotation marks, it means the person that does not have your mindset, your mentality of doing your very best always. Okay, so let me give you a simple example of what I mean by that, because this topic that we're talking about is a very good one that can be understood better from examples. Let's say that you are very, very good at making birthday cakes, or cakes in general, but especially birthday cakes, okay? And because you give your very best, you don't make the kind of cakes that everybody can buy in a regular store, right? You make exceptional cakes. And let's say that your price is $100 for a birthday cake, or a wedding cake, or whatever. Let's say birthday cake for the sake of simplicity, Again, for the sake of the example, okay, don't cling on values at an absolute level. I'm pretty sure that not not even in your country, a cake costs $100. I mean, that's just way too expensive. I don't exactly know right now how much a birthday cake is in my country, but anyway, it's nowhere near $100. But for the sake of having an example that it's easy to follow, let's say that the birthday cakes that you make, because they're super high quality from all points of view, they cost $100. Okay, and let's say that you have perhaps a person that you consider a friend, or maybe even a good friend, or a member of your family, but a more distant member, or someone that is something to you. Okay, it's not your random guy from the street. It's someone that means something to you. And that person knows that you always, no matter what, do your very best and provide the highest quality possible. That person might want and might have a very high chance of manipulating you by just coming to you and saying, hey, my, I don't know, nephew or whatever, it's gonna be his birthday soon, and I would like to buy him a birthday cake, but we don't quite have $100. But like, we know that you're so good. We don't care about anything fancy. We don't care about I don't know, some extreme decorations or something. We just want a cake. We want a cake that's better than what we can buy on the market, let's say with $20. But we don't have $100, and we don't really care of that super ultra high quality. Could you just give us something for $50 only? And maybe this person would bring other arguments to the table that will help you persuade to accept the job. Okay, of course you have the option of saying, no, sorry, my cakes cost $100, I cannot give them for less. It's either 100 or nothing. But maybe you are in a particular situation when you just can't or don't want to refuse this person. So what will happen is that you will accept his $50. Technically speaking, he will not feel bad because he has explicitly told you, hey, you don't need to do your absolute very best because we don't need that level of high quality that you're used to when delivering cakes to, I don't know, let's say a five-star hotel or something. Yeah, we don't need that, So he feels okay with it. But you, because you do your very best, always, no matter what, you will deliver him a $100 cake for only $50. And this way he has manipulated you, and he has taken advantage of this particular aspect of yours. And maybe it was someone that you considered a friend, but it's not such a good friend because he saw that he can manipulate you this way, and he did it. On top of that, it's very, very easy to be manipulated at the workplace by your boss, by your superiors, by whoever, because they know that they can give you any job and you will do your very best no matter what. And of course, in parallel, they will come and they will explain to you why you cannot be paid correctly for your job because the company presumably has problems, financial problems, because your work will be used to potentially attract new customers that will increase the income, and potentially you will be paid more once new customers come in, and blah 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 blah. Like, The degree of ease with which you can be manipulated if you do every time everything your very best is ridiculously high. And trust me, I'm not this kind of guy that does everything every time his very best. And yet, I still have been able to be manipulated in the past this way. And like, this was one of the hard lessons of my life. I needed to, in time, to learn very well how to detect when I'm potentially manipulated, which sometimes is not easy at all, because sometimes there are very subtle ways in which people can manipulate us. So it, like, even for me, and I am a half-asser by Teal Swan's definition, not always, but you know, I sometimes do half-ass things because I consider they are just good enough, or I consider that it is even necessary to half-ass things, you know. And still, I was able to be manipulated in the past through this principle that I've just talked about earlier. Okay, so this is a serious problem. And no, it's not like, I don't want you to start thinking that, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal because, you know, maybe you're just gaining more experience, or maybe just the universe will give you in other ways. Nah. That shit never happens. Even if it happens, you're not supposed to rely on it. But again, from my perspective and from my life experience, that shit never happens. You know, whenever you are giving a lot to a person and you're not receiving equal, you will never receive anything anymore. I mean, from other sources. Okay, your work, your efforts are done, are gone. Anyway, I'm not gonna go too much into it. That could be a different discussion, because the idea is we cannot control what we receive, neither from people, neither from the universe, neither from anything. We can only control what we give. But again, that's a different topic. I'm not getting into that. So I've just explained how what Teal Swan says is a huge problem, or can be a huge problem, and many times it actually is, from the perspective of the ease with which you can be manipulated. The second problem is the real possibility of just wasting your time, your energy, and your resources in general. Let me give you another example so that you can understand what I'm talking about. I had two examples in my mind earlier. Right now I only remember one, but maybe as I will be explaining this one to you, the other will come back into my mind. Anyway, let's say that you're a carpenter and you create custom furniture. And let's say that you're not just a carpenter, you're more than a carpenter. You're like a sculptor, you know, a plastic artist that also can carve into wood and can create all sorts of shapes and decorations and embroideries. I hope I'm saying it correctly. I hope that's a word in English. Anyway, you create some really high quality shit furniture, right? And just like in the previous example, you obviously sell this high quality furniture very expensively and you make a good living of it. But at some point you decide, and of course, you know, every high quality thing that you do, no matter what your trade is, will take much more time, much more energy, many more resources to create rather than just simpler things. And let's say that one day, let's say that you have a house with a basement, okay, where you store all sorts of things. And one day you decide that you need a new cabinet to store some tools or whatever. But instead of just taking a few wooden planks and, you know, using some metal corners and some wood screws to just assemble a quick, simple, but at the same time robust and useful enough cabinet, you decide to, you know, create this cabinet as if you would be creating a new product that you would sell to a customer that asked you to do a custom job. And you go on the same process, the same very elaborate process, and you also throw yourself at carving all sorts of, I don't know, all sorts of symbols that you perhaps like, or patterns on the face of those wooden planks, and you just do a super elaborate job for a goddamn cabinet that's supposed to store just a few things in your basement where nobody sees him, you know, where even you just go there, pick those tools, and then go up again and you go on with your day. Well, and you do this because, just like Teal Swan recommends, you never half-ass anything. Well, congratulations, you've just wasted your energy, wasted your time, and wasted resources in general. I mean, you know, all the materials that you put into that cabinet. Because again, it's a goddamn cabinet that stores some pieces of shit, useful shit to you, but still some pieces of shit in a basement where nobody gets to admire it, and it's like holding, I don't know, a Rembrandt painting in your basement, and, you know, it's just absurd. It's just completely absurd. So these are at least the two problems that you can have, and there are high chances of you actually getting into these problems. If you don't understand the concept of good enough. On top of these two problems, in some cases, your progress will be extremely slow, and in some other cases it will also be completely impossible, so you will experience no progress at all. Let me give you a personal example in that one. In 2020, I decided to come back after roughly 20 years to my first passion, electronics, first passion from childhood. And because it's still a fairly expensive passion to have, I decided, instead of buying everything that I need, to create as many things that are within my power to create. Okay, so let me give you a few examples. You might not understand what I'm talking about, but even if you're not into electronics or you're not a technical person at all, you will still understand the concept. Okay, so in the smallest electronics lab, even as a hobbyist, even as an amateur, you know, you need to have at least one power supply, a few multimeters, one oscilloscope, one signal generator, and maybe a few other, you know, electronic tools. There are some of them that cannot be created by the average person at home. I mean, well, the average person cannot do anything anyway, but I mean, not the average person, but rather the average electronic hobbyist, you know, like an oscilloscope. That one is a pretty advanced and complex piece of equipment. You kind of need to buy it. Or a multimeter. A multimeter is, to a certain degree, you are able to build it. but not in the beginning. In the beginning, you do need to buy it. But a power supply can easily be created. Well, relatively easily, you know. A signal generator, at least a very rudimentary one, but useful one, still useful one, can be created by you at home. Other devices with which you can test some components can also be created. You don't necessarily need to buy professional ones, okay? And the thing is, these devices that I've created would be completely impossible to be created at the highest level of standards and quality from the very beginning. So initially, I created the best that I could, but at the same time, I created myself some tools that are just good enough so that they constitute a foundation, they constitute a first step that would allow me to then make more steps and evolve in this particular direction. If I would have set my mind, just like Teal Swan says, to create the absolute very best, I would have failed because I wouldn't have had the necessary knowledge. And I wouldn't have had that necessary knowledge because in order to obtain that knowledge, I would have needed to have this equipment in the first place. You know, so it's a bit of a circular problem. It's a vicious circle. You know, you need at least a rudimentary power supply in order to study all sorts of things and all sorts of components and circuitry in order for later to be able to build a really complex and powerful power supply. Same thing with a signal generator. I created the absolutely the most primitive one that is still good enough and is still useful enough to me in order to be able to learn other things so that later I can go on designing and building a truly great signal generator, you know. So in some cases you need to you basically need to discard completely this mindset that this mentality. I don't like the term mindset, honestly. This mentality that Teal Swan has promoted in that video. And instead, you need to adopt a completely different mentality, which is, it's better to just make smaller incremental steps, which by their very nature are the same thing as saying that it's best to make several steps that are just good enough so that at some point later you actually have a much higher chance of attaining a higher level place, a higher level point, to attain a point where you can provide a much higher quality service or product or whatever it is. Okay, so again, it is extremely necessary for us to develop a sense of good enough. On the other hand, this concept of good enough is a very contextual and typically means completely different things in completely different contexts. Okay, so let me give you just two more examples so that you can better understand myself, so you can better understand me. A few years ago, I decided, let me go even more back in time. Several years ago, I decided that I wanted to start training to gain muscles, but at the same time, I had no idea how to train myself. So I went into a gym, and I actually paid a personal trainer to train me, and I was trained by her for a year. Then something happened. Anyway, I'm gonna skip over unimportant details. I stopped training, but I stopped training for quite a few years. But about 3 years ago, or about 4 years ago, I decided that I will want in the future relative to that moment, I will want to restart my training and go on training. But I decided that I don't exactly like so much going to the gym, you know. So I decided, hey, wouldn't it be great if I had my own gym at home somehow? Well, yeah, of course it would be great. Sure, there are a few smaller disadvantages, but aside from those, it's totally possible to train at home. It's not difficult to buy yourself some heavy discs, some bars, and some other accessories, you know, and to train at home. But you kind of still, I mean, it would be best if you had something like a fitness device with cables and wheels, and you know how fitness devices are in a gym. But I did not have enough money or enough space in my house to actually buy one of those fitness devices that you see in the gyms. They occupy way too much space. They are not quite that universal. There are a few models that are universal, but anyway, I'm not getting into very small details. The point is that I came to the conclusion that it would be better from several perspectives if I would create my own fitness device. So what I did was that I started thinking about this device. I started designing it. I started buying welding equipment because I realized I cannot just drill holes into some pieces of metal and put them together with screws and nuts, and like that fitness device needs to hold, ideally needs to hold about 200 kilograms. Okay, maybe I'll never get to the point where I actually train with 200 kilograms, but it needs to be designed for 200 kilograms in order for you to feel safe that you can work with 50, 60, 80, 100 kilograms, right? So for that, it needed to be welded. So, all the pieces needed to be welded and not just screwed. So I did all the necessary things to learn how to weld, to buy myself the cheapest equipment that I could, which again goes back to the idea that you need to develop a sense of good enough. You're not going to buy, if you don't plan to do something like this, you're not going to buy the most expensive welding equipment, even though that's the best, but it's the best for what? It's the best for professional work, not for, a hobby project. And in the end, my fitness device turned out to have 3 major problems after I finished creating it completely. So I designed it, I created it piece by piece. I put it, I almost put it on the wall because it's fixed in the wall, and I realized there are 2 big problems immediately after I finished it. But fortunately, those problems I was able to overcome with relatively simple solutions that were more like a workaround, not quite like a solution. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It worked, and it worked for about half a year. And then I noticed that I had yet another problem, which was also pretty big, But then I also found a solution, and I fixed it, and now it's got no problem whatsoever. Was it the absolute best that I could have done? No, it wasn't. I could have done better. But the point is, if what I did is good enough for me to work with it, why would I have wasted more money, more time, more energy, more resources in doing something that would not have brought me anything more than this one that I already have, and that is just good enough? You know, it really does not make any sense at all. And let me give you one final example, which might be a bit weird and funny, but anyway, think about this particular video that you're basically listening right now, because on the video I only have a screen on which I have written, you know, just the core ideas that I've been talking so far. Could I have done this video better? Well, yes, I could have searched on the internet stock images or stock videos that could accompany my words. Perhaps I could have filmed myself, although I'm not a fan of doing that. There would have been definitely better ways of doing this particular video. Does it make sense for me to do so? Well, no, it doesn't. One, because right now nobody watches my videos. Two, because I'm not really getting anything out of these videos. I'm actually making you a service, because I don't need to have these videos done. I don't need to have these messages out on the internet. You know, yeah, I feel good about doing them, but I'm not getting anything from doing them, and I'm also not actually receiving anything. And three, if you were interested in this video and you paid attention, you don't really care about what could I have possibly placed on the video itself, you know, because my message is delivered through my voice, so it's on the audio channel, not on the video channel. Okay, so could have this video been made better? Yes, sure. Would it have made sense? No, not really. Therefore, is this video good enough? Yes, definitely. I'm delivering the message that I want. If you listen to it, you will receive it. That's all that matters. Okay? So, in this particular case, I have reached the point of good enough. Anything more would be a waste of resources for me. It would not give you anything equally. You know, it's the concept of diminished returns that you have in English. You can just search it on the internet, and if you don't know what it means. So, overall, these are aspects that we need to be aware of. And it really sucks that this woman is not aware of them, has not mentioned anything in her video. So, in general, you know, be careful with what message you accept from what person, in what context does that message come, and what do you actually apply in your life. Before I end this video, let me just mention that it is also necessary, besides developing a sense of good enough, it is also necessary to develop a sense of when to quit and when to be perseverant. Not knowing when to quit can have bad or even disastrous consequences in the long term. I'm not gonna go overboard explaining this. Honestly, I think this should be crystal clear. If you quit something, it does not mean that you're a quitter. Okay, so let me make that crystal clear from the very beginning. Just because you quit something, maybe another thing, it does not necessarily mean you are a quitter. If overall this is not your general lifestyle, in which case, yeah, you do have a problem. But if this is not your general lifestyle, it is absolutely necessary to know when to say no and when to quit a certain situation, a certain relation, or whatever it is. Okay? There are literally countless people around us that have been severely impacted by the fact that they did not know how to quit and when to quit, actually. Okay, people that did not quit their relations with their abusive partners when they needed to, and now they are suffering. Whether they have diseases like cancer, whether they, I don't know, perhaps women who are still beaten by their men, or I don't know what kind of other situations. That's a clear example of people who did not know when to quit. People that just stood years and years and years in a row in working in a company where they were just a robot doing something, and it wasn't even something that developed them somehow. It wasn't some high-level intellectual work. It was just a routine work, and they stood years and years and years in that workplace, never thinking about anything better. That's also a good example of people who just do not know when to quit. Or people that just, they try so hard to graduate a certain university, even though it's completely not for them. It's not within their natural skills and abilities. But they just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and they just don't understand that they should quit and go do something else. And the examples are countless, but I'm just stopping at mentioning this. It is important, as a conclusion of this video, it is important for us to have, and if we don't have, to develop a sense of good enough. And it's also important to develop, if we don't have already, a sense of when to quit. So I'm gonna stop at this. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope it was useful. If you have something to comment, and of course your comment is respectful, please drop it down below. I plan to have some more videos in the near future, so perhaps you might like to like and subscribe to this channel, or just in general check for new content soon. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.